Happy New Year. It's January 2025, the beginning of the second quarter of the 21st century and the end of all your resolutions as you slowly sink back into a pear-shaped blob, careening into oblivion like George Clooney in Gravity, but without the paycheck. So, after you've canceled that gym membership and put all your new workout gear on eBay, let's gather together around the crystal ball of the imagination while I pretend to gaze into the future so I can make ridiculous predictions that I hope you'll forget by the time I get around to claiming I was right about everything. In politics, I predict that Donald Trump will take office January 20th, and on day one, he'll reduce corruption in government 80% by not being Joe Biden. I predict that on day one, Trump will issue a blanket pardon of half the January 6 demonstrators. The other half, or undercover FBI agents, will be put in prison where they belong. And I predict that on day one, Trump will issue a declaration that there are only two genders, that men are the ones with testicles, except for Republicans in the House of Representatives. In journalism, I predict ABC will fire George Stephanopoulos for intimidating women into silence. And they'll realize that's why they hired him in the first place, and then he'll be rehired and assigned to The View. I predict that CNN will double its viewership when an old man in Milwaukee forgets how to use his remote. And I predict that the New York Times will save space by publishing nothing but Trump emojis, followed by crap emojis, followed by crying emojis, until the paper is so simplistic and repetitive it can be written by AI, but without the I, so it's just A. As in, this paper sucks. Cancel my subscription. In the culture, I predict that the Disney company will hire an armed security force to hunt down every last person who still occasionally feels inspired or delighted or even mildly entertained by a Star Wars movie, and compel them to watch movies with unattractive lesbians in baggy clothes having totally absurd sword fights until the viewers confess there's no such thing as a godlike force or Jedis or manhood. Everything is meaningless, and they're sorry they ever liked Star Wars to begin with, and we should all just die. I predict that a starlet will show up at a French film festival wearing a completely transparent dress, and a news site will describe the outfit as shocking, even though no one is shocked or even particularly interested. I predict June will be Gay Pride Month, yet in a stunning paradox, the entire month will pass without a single person feeling pride at being gay, although there will be a general sense of relief when it's finally July and we can just drop the entire subject, which has been making everyone feel oppressively uncomfortable. In sports, I predict Kansas City will go to the Super Bowl, where the referees will allow Patrick Mahomes to carry a small firearm to defend himself against the pass rush, though if he shoots anyone dead, it will be a 5-yard penalty. Finally, I predict that in December, a pear-shaped man will go on eBay to buy some good-as-new workout gear and discover he has sent his money to himself and now has to dig the gear out of the closet and mail it to himself so he can put it on eBay. Those are my 2025 predictions. Here's some predictions from our next president.
We're going to win so much. We're going to win at every level. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We're going to win economically. We're going to win with the economy. We're going to win with military. We're going to win with healthcare and for our veterans. We're going to win with every single facet.
Zippity-dee-dah, zippity-yay. My, oh my. What a wonderful day.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. Yay! You'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and gay.
We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more.
Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. All right, here we are once again in 2025, laughing our way through making America great again. If you are watching the show, wherever you're watching the show, leave a comment. Even if you're watching the show outdoors, just write on somebody's wall or, on the sidewalk or something. And if that comment is, really, really hateful and biased and bigoted and just disgusting morally and in every other possible way, we'll read it on the show because it'll fit right in. This comment is from Nothing Else to Lose, 7661. he says or she says, I love the Donald Trump winning clip. Please make that part of your show somehow every day, especially with the Hallelujah Mormon wire at the end. And we're not going to do that. This is a New Year's resolution. I've just decided in 2025, you will not hear that on my show at all. Let's get right to it. Today's episode, Winning the Long Game. Now, I actually do have another New Year's resolution, besides the fact that in 2025, you will never hear the Trump happiness montage. But I believe, as I've said many times, that Trump's victory was a victory in the argument against leftist culture, about their media being dishonest, about their entertainment being dishonest. And just the fact that people were willing to vote for Trump showed that they did not believe the things that they were hearing. And now we've won the argument against them, but we haven't built a culture to defeat them. We have to start to build a right-wing culture, an American culture, a pro-founder culture. And we have to end the bad ideas that they've been spreading and really extinguish them, not by just hating on them and stomping on them and arguing against them, though that's always a good time, but we have to create the ideas that we think should support the culture. So, I took time off over the holidays, obviously. I hope you guys had a good New Year and good Christmas and Hanukkah. And I took time off and I stayed off social media for the most part, but every now and again I'd go on X. And one of the things you notice on X is that during the holidays, a lot of the sane people start to either go on less or not go on at all. And so it leaves like all the crazy hate-filled, rage-filled people on there just spewing all this hatred. And one of the things that always happens in every Christmas season is because there's no news, the news that there is becomes a big, big deal. And we once had a donor to the Daily Wire back in the old days call Jeremy and ask him to reprimand me because I said one of these stories was going to be forgotten within 3 weeks. And Jeremy wouldn't, because he knew I was probably right. And after 3 weeks, the thing was forgotten. So we had this H-1B controversy, which you may have followed online if you were on at all, which is a visa for letting talented foreigners into the country, which obviously we want to do to pillage our competitors and also make ourselves better. But, Vivek Ramaswamy, he was this irritating Indian nerd type. He put it in such a way that he was insulting Americans. He said Americans, honor mediocrity. That's why we don't have enough good engineers. And Elon Musk pitched in by saying he himself was an H-1B guy. And then he helpfully added, just to keep the conversation civilized, take a big step back and F yourself in the face. That was so everybody got crazy. It was like a MAGA civil war. It's a MAGA schism. And it's like, it's not. It's gone. It's a simple thing. They have to fix the visas a little bit and reform them a little bit, but we're always going to want to bring in the good people. That's always been the good idea about immigration. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, this is what I feel like too much of commentary is about. And as I'm talking about my New Year's resolution for the show, and I don't want to talk about every little thing that flares up and makes us all upset and gets us into these arguments, because I think those things pass unless we look at the ideas behind them. I don't believe we're in a fight with bad people versus good people. There are bad people on both sides, obviously, but I think we are in a fight between bad ideas and good ideas and a bad vision, a truly bad, broken, horrible vision that makes people do bad things. Bad ideology makes people do bad things, and a good vision. So the big story for me is simply the fact that the West is crippled and dying. It's sick. And what I mean by that is we're not reproducing. Now, last year we had the growth in America last year was 84% immigrants, 16% of the growth in population in America. The year before last, I guess it would be now, was 16% was Americans. And that's happening across the West. And we have unbridled immigration, partly because they want to bring in people who will vote for them and all the other conspiratorial reasons, but mostly they need human beings. The reason Europe is swamped with Islamist crazies and immigrants who hate the West but want to take over the West, and the reason we've been swamped with people we don't even know who they are, we aren't even experiencing yet the damage that they're going to have after the Biden administration let them come in, is because there aren't enough people to support this creaking, overspending welfare state that keeps people like Nancy Pelosi funded with money and power like a tick stuck on the body politic, sucking out that money from that big welfare state, and it needs people to keep it going. So we need that big, we need more people. And if we don't produce people ourselves, they'll come in and we will be replaced just by numbers. That's what will happen. And no, it will not be the West anymore if the people coming in are not assimilated, not brought in slowly, not taught to live according to American values. And people say to me, why are you always talking about sex? Why don't you always stop talking about sex? Ooh, sex, we hate that. And I'll tell you this because you won't hear this on Michael Knowles' show because Knowles doesn't actually know this. Sex is where babies come from, right? And women are the people who have them, and women raise them, and women nurture them and make homes for them while men go out and hopefully support those homes and build a world for those homes to exist in. And that's why when our sexual lives fall apart and when we go into the kind of sexual dysfunction that we have, everything falls apart. And the people who want this to happen, who want to just end the West and end what the West stands for, the freedoms it stands for, the religion it stands for, the culture that it stands for, that's why they want this to happen. They're fine with it. And that's why they spend all this time trying to convince us that we should be proud of a month for homosexual pride. And we have to celebrate working women instead of at-home moms. We have to call for more government and corporate childcare instead of honoring moms and upraising them in our society and actually paying them the respect and honor they deserve. And I'm not hating on gays and I'm not hating on working women. That's not the point. The point is who is the center of our society? And I'm telling you that it is moms and the dads who support them. So your sex life, the things that you honor, the role of women, terrorism, national debt, it's all one story. It's all one story. The things that are happening and have been happening for the past 50, 60 years, it's not a conspiracy. It's a bad idea in the culture working its way out. So there's a terrorist attack, and I'll talk about that, but I also want to talk about entertainment more. I want to talk about the media more. I want to talk about culture more, because that's where the poison that's killing our society comes from. And while I'm talking, I want you to keep three ideas in your mind. Three ideas that I think are really important. Anti-Semitism, obviously the hatred of Jews, which I've told you is really the hatred of the big Jew, God and Jesus Christ. Misogyny, which is the hatred of women as women, not just, women bodies, but women acting as women in their roles as homemakers, as their roles of family producers, as their roles of, home, of putting the sacrifice of love in front of the desires of power. And the last one, of course, is materialism, the idea that we're all just, skin monkeys full of chemicals, and everything can be fixed by arranging the material of it. I want you to remember this. All those three ideas are one idea. They're all different faces of one idea, and this is all one big story. Have you ever browsed in incognito mode? It's probably not as incognito as you think. Google recently settled a $5 billion lawsuit after being accused of secretly tracking users in incognito mode. Google's defense, incognito does not mean invisible. In fact, all your online activity is still 100% visible to a ton of third parties unless you use ExpressVPN. Without ExpressVPN, your online activities remain visible to several parties, even when you're using incognito mode. Your internet service provider, ISP, can track every website you visit, as can your mobile network provider. The same goes for whoever administers your Wi-Fi network, whether that's your school, employer, or family members. ExpressVPN addresses this privacy concern by routing all your internet traffic through encrypted servers, effectively preventing these third parties from accessing your browsing history. The best part is that ExpressVPN is incredibly easy to use. You fire up the app, you click one button, you're protected. It works on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can stay secure on the go. Its convenience and protection are a likely big factor in why ExpressVPN is rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. I use it all the time. It's on all my devices. I want to make sure that the stuff I'm writing about, say, the government is protected from being spied on. So secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/Klavan. That's EXPRESS, VPN.com/Klavan. You can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/ how do you spell VPN? It's KLAVAN. All right, Chapter 1, Left in Darkness. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. I know the terrorist attack is the big news. We got to talk about the news, but I'm going to talk about it in the way I want to talk about it, in the setting that I want to talk about it. Obviously, there was a terrible terrorist attack in New Orleans, sounded like the French Quarters, Canal Street and Bourbon Street. 14 dead, 35 injured, an American-born veteran with an Arab-sounding name whose life was coming apart. He became an Islamist. He was always into Islam, fell away from Islam, came back to Islam in its worst possible form, had an ISIS flag and explosive devices, and it drove a truck into a crowd, and then shot it out with lawmen, and the law then luckily took him out. And at the same time, there was an explosion in a Tesla Cybertruck outside the Trump hotel in Vegas, and that may be connected, but we don't know yet. The FBI is saying that there's no other people involved in this, but it's hard to trust the FBI on anything. But it's hard to trust the FBI because they haven't been doing their job. I mean, this guy in New Orleans apparently posted 5 times on social media that he was becoming a crazy Islamist inspired by ISIS. The FBI didn't pick up on it. But luckily, they did spot a man speaking Latin within walking distance of a Catholic church, and they arrested him on suspicion of opposing abortion. But here's the one thing everyone noticed. Right after this event, in New Orleans, where DEI is the rage, among the New Orleans FBI and the New Orleans Police Department, DEI is a big, big deal. They love it. DEI is racism. It's hiring people according to their race. That's what it is. And so the assistant agent in charge gets up, and this is what she says about the terrorist attack right after it has gone on.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if this is a viable device or not. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we're asking everyone to stay away from Bourbon Street, specifically from Canal Street to St. Anne. That is my ask. Once again, stay away from Bourbon Street, Canal Street, all the way to St. Anne until we can figure out what is going on.
So a guy with an ISIS flag and explosive devices drives a truck into a crowd, just like it happened in Germany a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't very long ago, and has been happening really across the West, across Europe. All these terrorists either inspired by ISIS or connected to ISIS or Hamas or whoever, whichever terror arm they choose. But somehow it's not a terrorist attack. That's like lying by reflex, okay? So now the mayor comes out, and the mayor says, it's a terrorist attack, obviously. And a lot of people were actually saying this, including Mayorkas, I believe, said that, of course it's a terrorist attack. And CNN rushes on the air to tell us that we should be ashamed of ourselves for seeing what we're seeing. Now, all of this is amazing because it's a reflex. They still don't realize that their pants have been pulled. They still don't realize that we're looking at their lying backsides. We get it now. That's what the election of Trump means. It means we get it. They're lying, and all of them are lying, and they're lying by instinct. They instantly did it. So here's just to look at CNN shaming people who think a guy with an ISIS flag driving into people and killing 14 of them, injuring over 30 of them, that you should be ashamed for thinking that's a terrorist attack. Here's CNN News Roundup, cut 4.
Right. I mean, I've sadly covered too many tragedies like this, and it struck me because normally you don't come right out of the gate and label it terrorist attack or not. Juliet, you say we're looking into all possibilities because it's so early. You don't really know. And there were these explosive devices. This suspect shot at police, hit 2 police officers, 10 people are killed, more than 30 in the hospital. I mean, this is horrific, Juliet. How do you see this?
Yeah, I just think the mayor made a mistake. Let's just, in some ways move on. It has to be clarified. I do not think she should have come out. You actually saw the people behind her sort of flinch. She was speaking as a politician and as someone who governs the city, that this was terrorizing. It was terrible. It was terror for those there. But we are now in the investigation and prosecution stage.
So you should be ashamed for saying this is Islamist terror. The same thing's happening in England, where more and more of these gangs, what do they call them? The grooming gangs. They take most of them Pakistanis, they take these young girls, they prepare them to be, and then they pass them around among themselves, abuse them in horrific, horrific ways. And the police are not only ignoring it, but accusing some of the women. They're silencing people. They're saying we shouldn't talk about this in the name of diversity and all this. And on the left, at the same time here, on the left, hundreds of anti-Jew genocidal Palestinian supporters, hours after this attack in New Orleans and the attack in Vegas, take to the streets, clog up traffic in support of Hamas, in support of the terrorists, the genocidal anti-Jewish terrorists who are linked to Iran. And they feel free to do this because Alvin Bragg didn't prosecute them after they shut down the universities. So why shouldn't they go out? They're not going to be accused of anything. If they get arrested, they'll be released right away. Why shouldn't they? Because, and again, in the name of diversity, we're supposed to be happy about this. And on the right, you get these anti-Semitic, Jew-hating conspiracy theorists declaring that these terrorist attacks are all just a ruse to get us to go to war with Iran. So the same people, the exact same people who call themselves America First, are literally protecting a nation that has sworn to destroy us, Iran, and that hates, the state of Israel, just to put it bluntly, saved Western civilization last year while Western civilization was trying to stop it from doing that. And all these guys want is to get, that we should be friendly with Iran. This is on the right. So no one wants to grasp the nettle that there's a problem in bringing massive amounts of people into a Judeo-Christian society who are not in league with the Judeo-Christian values, and they're doing it. It's fine with them because they don't believe in Judeo-Christian values. And the right has a problem with this. The anti-Semitic right has a problem with this because they don't like the Jews and the Christians being linked together. We interviewed Doug Wilson just before the holidays, the pastor from Moscow, Idaho, and he was kind of badgered into putting out a tweet saying there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian religion. Well, that's fine, but Judeo-Christian is not a religious description. It's a description of a culture. It's like saying Greco-Roman culture. We know the Greeks and the Romans are not the same people. They have a lot of different values. We know the Jews and Christians have a lot of different beliefs, but we understand that Jesus was a Jew, Mary, all the apostles, the God they worshiped was the God of the Old Testament. The Psalms Christ quoted, which is what he quoted more than anything else, the Psalms of King David, the arguments they got into were Jewish arguments. And so when they're attacking this connection, they're trying to separate Jesus from himself and us from Jesus. It's Christ who's under attack both on the left and the right, right? Judeo-Christian culture is just a fancy name for the fact that, when you put up the 10 Commandments in a classroom, not that many people protest, but if you put up a crucifix, they would. That's because we all share the 10 Commandments. And when you bring people in who don't believe in that, who are opposed to it, who haven't taken the time to become assimilated to those values. I'm not condemning all Muslims by any stretch of the imagination. I know many lovely people who are Muslims. That's not what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this collection of violent people in this religion and their antipathy for the way we live and the values we have. That's the target. That's the target. It is Christ who's under attack. It is Judeo-Christian society that is under attack, and that's why we're not supposed to see it. That's what we're not supposed to see. And I'll take a look at the ways in which they keep us from trying to see these things. All right, balance of nature. Balance of nature, fruits and veggies. I love this stuff. It's the most convenient way to get whole fruits and vegetables daily. Nature is good at giving us the nutrients we need through fruits and vegetables. So balance of nature takes fruits and vegetables, freeze dries them, turns them into a powder, and then puts them into a capsule so you won't hear them screaming. You take your fruit and veggie capsule every day, and then your body knows what to do with them. Balance of nature is just one ingredient of a balanced lifestyle and has no intention to replace a healthy diet, exercise, sleep, or any other healthy habits. It's intended to be used in concert with other healthy habits. I take these every day. I love them because they're easy. You can take them on the road. You don't have a lot of juice dripping down your face. You don't just biting into a dozen things. It's a great way to get the nutrients you need from fruits and veggies. Go to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code Klavan for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com. Promo code Klavan. And listen, since it's a new year, I'm not playing the Trump happiness montage anymore, and I'm not playing the jingle about how to spell Klavan.
There are no easy things.
Chapter 2, Left Behind. So remember, anti-Semitism, misogyny, and materialism, all the same thing. All right. So we won this argument, and now the people who lost the argument are taking stock, right? The press, the lying press, the reason the things that Democrats do are so much worse than the things that Republicans do is A, their ideas are worse, but B, they have the press behind them. So when the Republicans do something bad, they get caught. The press catches them. When Democrats do something bad, they cover up for them. So they're taking stock now. What went wrong? What went wrong? And what they mean by that is, how did we lose the election? The press is saying, how did we lose the election? So it doesn't matter whether they think about themselves or not. They can't get out of their own lies because they're too ashamed to face what they are. So they had an end of the year roundtable at CBS, and it included this exchange with their legal correspondent, Jan Crawford, who's a fairly honest broker of information. Let's cut 5.
One of the things we also do in the year-end correspondence roundtable is dig into what was undercovered or underreported. Jan?
Undercovered, underreported. That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate.
At the presidential debate with Donald Trump.
Unquestioned. And, you know, it's starting to emerge now that his advisors kind of managed his limitations. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal for 4 years. And yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years.
The only thing that's wrong with that, she's of course absolutely right, but it wasn't undercovered. They covered it. They lied. They covered up for Joe Biden's decline, just like the people around him were covering up for it. It's not like they couldn't have investigated it. We all saw it. Everybody on the right saw it. But of course, the right is always demonized, and so they never say 3 words that you're not allowed to say. Conservatives are right. So they let Democrat after Democrat on to sell this line. This is clip 8.
President Biden, who I've been around numerous times just in this last year, is sharp, he's focused, he's bright.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on.
He's smart, he's on his game.
I was in almost every meeting with the president, and the president was in front of and on top of it all.
I couldn't, obviously Jimmy Carter, former President Jimmy Carter, died over the holidays at the age of, seemed like 900, like he had been around forever. And I couldn't help thinking that he just held on to life until he was absolutely sure he was no longer the worst president in history. And Biden was not just decaying, he was also massively corrupt his entire life. The media repeatedly lied about there being no evidence of his massive corruption, despite the shell companies, despite all the evidence in Hunter Biden's laptop, despite all the evidence that Biden was actually physically involved. Tucker Carlson got this story before anybody else, I think. Had that guy, what was his name, Bobolinsky, was that his name, that who was involved in some of these meetings. The New York Times repeatedly claimed there was no evidence. And Biden himself said this over and over again because he is a lying dog-faced pony soldier. Is cut 7.
I did not know he was on the board of that company. I've never discussed my business or their business, my sons or daughters. I never discussed a single thing with my son about anything having to do with Ukraine. I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
So the National Archives branch of the government has finally released photos showing then Vice President Biden meeting with 2 of Hunter Biden's Chinese government-linked business partners, proving that the president lied about not interacting with his family's foreign patrons. This is from the New York Post. And that means that not just the party, not just the media, but the government also colluded in this lie. So we have all of our institutions corrupt. And so when the FBI comes out and says this wasn't terrorism, we know they're lying. Then when they say no one else was involved, how do we know? How do we know whether they're lying or not? They have destroyed our trust in the institutions by filling them with this kind of garbage. And now when they're confronted with the fact that we see them, we understand. When you said Trump was a threat to democracy, we understood that you were the greater threat to democracy. We understood that you had lied to us about Biden. We understand that you're lying all the time and protecting one side and exposing the other, which I want them to expose both sides, by the way. I don't want them to go easy on anybody. They still can't face it. According to the Washington Post, in private, Biden said he should have picked someone other than Merrick Garland as Attorney General because he complained that the Justice Department was too slow under Garland in prosecuting Trump, and its aggressiveness in prosecuting Biden's son Hunter was damaging to him. So he wanted the DOJ to be even more corrupt than it was. He didn't think, well, it would be bad if that corruption was seen while he was saying that Donald Trump, if he got elected, would put his political enemies in jail. While he was saying that, So why is it they can't see their own lies? Why do they lie? It's not just, they don't just lie, but they enforce the lies with shame, with cancellation, with name calling. You're transphobic, you're Islamophobic, you're homophobic, you're racist, you're sexist, if you start to bring these issues up. Why can they not let go of the structure of lies? And it's because they're materialists. They're Marxists. They're materialists, and their ideas don't work. Now, a lot of them are technically Marxists. I mean, a guy like Obama was actually more of a fascist. He wanted people to keep control of their own businesses, but then he wanted the government to force them to do what he wanted them to do, which is fascist, socialist. But still, these are all based on the materialist idea, the idea that life is a machine, and if we can just destroy all those things that get in the way, or get women out of the home, if we can treat your depression with drugs instead of meaning, if we can redistribute the money instead of forcing you into a position where if you want to eat, you got to work. You got to do a day's work if you want to get a day's pay. We can teach people not to be people. Then, in their glorious, wondrous plans, they will recreate paradise. And when it doesn't work, and it never works, it always ends up with bloodshed. It always ends up in disaster. It's not like an engineer. It's not like Elon Musk. Whatever you think of Elon Musk, most of us really admire what he does, but have qualms about some of the things he says or some of the ways he lives his life. But that's, it's America. A lot of people are going to be weird and offbeat. That's fine. But when his rocket crashes, he can't just say it didn't crash. He can't just say, oh, we'll send it up again and do exactly the same thing. He's got to fix it, right? But that's because he's an engineer working with material. These people are working with reality, and they can't get it to change into a material thing. And so when you take away the fact, when you point out the fact that nothing they do works, nothing they do is morally right, nothing they do is in keeping with our values, it's an attack not just on their rocket ships, on their thing, it's an attack on their glory, on their status, on their power, and on their freedom, because a non-material world includes a ruling spirit against whom to rebel is evil. So they have to silence any little boy who sees that the emperor is wearing no clothes. So that's why I've kind of rushed through this part of the show, because I want to spend some time talking to you about entertainment and the culture, because I feel that after years and years of pounding this drum, I understand that the right now sees that the culture is important, but it doesn't see how to fight back against it, has not quite figured out what it is that we have to do and how we have to do it. Most of our attempts to beat back the culture have been kind of, pale and not really as good as they should be. So let's talk a little bit about entertainment. Now, I have to tell you, my sleep in 2024 was awful, and that's because 2024 was a year. In any year that's not a year, I sleep great, but in years that are years, my sleep is not so good. However, I will tell you something that does put me to sleep, which is Beam's Dream Powder. It's a science-backed, healthy nighttime blend for sleep. When I really need to knock myself out, I take this. It's really tasty. It's actually delicious, and it works. It really helps you go to sleep and wake up refreshed, not groggy. Better sleep, you get more energy, your focus comes back. Personally, I really feel like I can tackle my days after I use this. Other sleep aids can cause next day grogginess, but Dream contains a powerful, all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Before I took it, I researched all those ingredients. They really do work. Now, as I look ahead to 2025, I'm determined to keep the momentum going. Dream is something I just really love to do when I need to just put myself out. And it also, like I said, it tastes good. It's fun to just sit there and have a cup at the end of the day. It'll help you feel your best every single day. The ultimate sleep refresh for the new year. Try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Klavan and use code Klavan at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Klavan. Use code Klavan for up to 40% off. And this is the new year, so I'm no longer going to spell Klavan, which obviously is Klavan. Chapter 3, The Wicked Culture. Now, we talk about culture all the time. We talk about the arts all the time. And the thing about the right, I'm sorry to have to say this, because obviously, I consider myself to be on the right, a conservative, at least someone who's trying to conserve what I consider to be the founding ideas of this country and the ideas that kind of come out of England and out of Europe and out of Greece and out of Rome and out of Jerusalem. and have formed who we are and have gotten us to the point where we are as free and as rich and as powerful as any nation has ever been on earth, more of those things than any nation has ever been. And yet we would elect a president who says, I'm going to fundamentally transform America. And that happens through the culture. That does not happen. It does not happen because people like his ideas or believe what he said, because nobody even knew who Obama was. Nobody knew who he was. He'd never voted for anything. He never had an opinion. He never did anything. He just played the first black president brilliantly. Okay. And we do, there's something about conservatives. They want everything to be a moral lecture. And that's not what culture does. What the arts do. What the arts do is they reflect the culture. And yes, they also influence the culture. And so the first thing that happens, but their main purpose is to delight, right? The main purpose of the arts is to delight. And tragedy can delight, and comedy can delight, and horror can delight. All of these things thrill and delight us. And that's why you go to the movies. And so the first thing you see is whether you like something or not. And a lot of people can't tell the difference between whether they like, if they like something, they think it must be good for them, or they think it must be saying something that's positive. And a lot of conservatives think if it's not saying something that they agree with, that it's not any good. And that's not true. Many, many good movies are telling you something about the culture that you don't want to hear because it's so ugly, it's so twisted, it's so broken. And the proof, again, that this culture is broken is that we're dying, we're not reproducing, we're not producing children. And when you're not doing that, something is terribly, terribly wrong with your culture. It's not COVID. Been happening for a long time. It's been a long decline. COVID was a not just COVID, but the way it was mishandled. That didn't help. But it is a crisis of meaning. It's a crisis of belief. It's a crisis of culture. So the first thing you look at and you say, well, this movie was good. And then you say, well, what was it telling me? What part of the culture was expressing? I mean, a good example is, for instance, Impressionist art. It's very beautiful, but it's telling you something about the culture that may not be as healthy as we want it to be. So when I talk about a movie and I tell you whether I liked it or not, that's not necessarily saying that it said something that you want to hear. Brandon Morse is a senior editor at Red State, and he has written an excellent piece about the culture war seen through stories. He says, when you really break it down, this is Brandon Morse at Red State, says, when you really break it down, the culture war is a war over stories, how these stories are told. Entire cultures, including our own, are built on stories, both real and fictional. Ruining these stories, especially for fresh generations who consume media differently than previous generations can, erodes pride, respect, and alignment with cultural values, and it's very easy to do. All you have to do is destroy the logic of the story's universe. The logic of a universe is effectively the rules by which it operates. He says, let's take Star Wars. I was joking about this in the opening, but it's a really good point. He says, according to the logic of the Star Wars universe, not everyone is force sensitive, and it's very rare to find someone who is. Anakin Skywalker was an immaculate birth, done so by the will of the Force, and this is part of what led to the galactic struggle that ended with the balancing. Disney recently threw all that out the window with The Acolyte, and now immaculate births can happen because lesbian space witches performed a stupid chant, and anyone can use the Force. He then goes on to talk about The Witcher. Now, I watched the first episode of The Witcher and really, really liked it because it was about a woman who decides to have power instead of children. And she basically kind of destroys herself. But then, as the stories went on, Witcher 2 and Witcher 3, it really just became a feminist rant. And the Witcher himself, who was a special man, special power to fight monsters, he became almost ancillary to the story. And they're just awful. He then goes on to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and Fox News covered what's happening with Dungeons and Dragons. You know, this is the game where you imagine a dungeon in a kind of Tolkien-like mythology. Now in Dungeons and Dragons, races like dwarves and so on are now species, and some character traits, this is according to the New York Times, some character traits have been divorced from biological identity. A mountain dwarf is no longer inherently brawny and durable. A high elf no longer intelligent and dexterous by definition. Wizards of the Coast, the Dungeons and Dragons publisher owned by Hasbro, has endorsed a trend throughout role-playing games in which players are empowered to halt the proceedings if they ever feel uncomfortable destroying their stories. And this is what we see in Wicked. Now, Wicked is a musical that it's based on a Gregory Maguire novel, although I hear it's loosely based. I haven't read the novel. And Wicked was the big smash of the Christmas season, smash movie of the Christmas season, where they took 2.5 hours to tell half the play, which the whole play is about 2.5 to 3 hours long. And this turns the story of the Wizard of Oz on its head by making the Wicked Witch, and we all remember the Wicked Witch with her cackle and her green face, turning her into the sort of misunderstood girl who is going to save the day. All right. And I want to say, first of all, that a lot of people really loved it. And I like musicals well enough. I mean, I like really good musicals, and I tend to like musicals that are very complex, like Stephen Sondheim musicals. But Stephen Schwartz, I think he's a good lyricist. I think he's a solid, I don't think he's the top of the top tier, but he's in the top tier of lyricists, and he can write some really good stuff. And so I didn't have any animosity toward this. I think some of the songs from Wicked are good, popular, and Defying Gravity, and and the one Dancing Through Life. I think they're really pleasant songs, and certainly this movie looks great. I didn't like this movie. A lot of people really did like it. I thought it had great singing in it. This Cynthia Erivo, who plays the Wicked Witch, has a magnificent voice. It's just beautiful. I didn't think she sang enough. And Ariana Grande, she has a much thinner voice, but she's playing a kind of thin, shallow character, so it kind of worked for her. But I thought the storytelling was awful. I really did. I thought the storytelling was just touching on cultural touchstones. So, for instance, there are talking animals, and suddenly, for no reason we can understand, these talking animals become the Jews of the 1930s, slowly being edged out of their positions, of their teaching positions, and put in cages. And we understand that this is the Jews during the run up to the Holocaust. And so we know that's how we know it's bad. We don't know why it's bad. We don't know what the talking animals have been doing. But the lady who is the Wicked Witch, she is born and she's green. And so nobody likes her because she's green. So we understand that she's black. That's another thing. We all know these are the things that we're supposed to care about, the race of people. And she is misunderstood and she is excluded, especially by Glinda, who becomes later on in the real movie, but becomes the Good Witch, who's played by Ariana Grande, and she is played as a, feminine kind of bad girl. She's not terrible. She's just kind of shallow and all about tossing her hair and all about beauty and being popular and all of these things. But somehow, slowly over time, Glinda and Elphaba become friends, and then they face the crisis, which is that the Wizard of Oz is not just a fake. He is also evil. He is a guy looking for power. He is manipulating everybody so he can keep his power and expand his power. And that's why he is using Elphaba to his purposes. All right. So there's a Substack called Fandom Pulse, fandompulsesubstack.com. And I want to credit them because I saw this movie and I didn't like it very much. I started to slip from my attention, and I did not catch this, but I think it's a perfect catch. This is by Art Gaines. And he says, C.S. Lewis gave the perfect explanation for why Wicked doesn't work as a film. And he quotes Perelandra. Now, Perelandra is one of the space trilogy, and the one I liked the one, That Hideous Strength, which I just thought was absolutely great. This is a novel by C.S. Lewis. It comes out in 1943, so you should keep that in mind. Not a very good novel, but it is kind of interesting theology. And what happens on this is a guy named Ransom who stands in for a Christian because Jesus ransomed the world. And a guy named Ransom goes to this planet named Perelandra, which is a planet that has not yet experienced the fall. And he arrives there in time to see the fall taking place. There's a queen figure and a king figure who are obviously like Adam and Eve. It's all a little different, but he knows this guy, Weston, who represents Satan, who's basically been taken over by Satan, and he is trying to corrupt the woman, the Eve character. And so one night, Ransom, the good guy, hears in the night Weston whispering into Eve's ear to corrupt her. And this is what he hears. I'm reading this from the book edited by me. Weston's voice was speaking gently and continuously. It appeared to be telling, with extreme beauty and pathos, a number of stories. Now, just catch that for a minute. C.S. Lewis is talking about the fact that the stories are being well told. They're entertaining. They're good. They're full of talent. They're filled with beauty and pathos. But all these stories were about women. The heroines of the stories seemed all to have suffered a great deal. They had been oppressed by fathers, cast off by husbands, deserted by lovers. but the stories all ended in a sense happily, sometimes with honors and praises to a heroine still living, more often with tardy acknowledgement and unavailing tears after her death, so she became a martyr. Ransom had more than a suspicion that many of these noble pioneers, these victorious women, had been in what in ordinary terrestrial speech we call witches or perverts. Many of them were bad people, but somehow they were the heroines of these stories. But that, he says, was all in the background. What emerged from the stories was rather an image than an idea. It was an image of men as pitifully childish, complacently arrogant, timid, meticulous, unoriginating, sluggish, and ox-like, rooted to the earth almost in their indolence, prepared to try nothing, to risk nothing, to make no exertion, and capable of being raised into full life only by the unthanked and rebellious virtue of their females. In other words, the woman was being schooled to rebel against her own womanhood and against the king of the planet, the Adam of the planet, her man. She was Eve being taught to disobey God's moral order. That is what was happening. And through these stories in which these women are oppressed, but we don't really get a look at their character except for the fact that they're rebellious, and their rebellion is always shown as a positive thing. And as we know from reading Paradise Lost, rebellion is one thing if you're rebelling against some oppressive human construct, but if you're rebelling against God's creation, then you're always going to be evil. All right. Now, Elphaba and Glinda get to the Wizard of Oz, and of course, as in the original story of the Wizard of Oz, he's a fake, but as I say, he's also a power-hungry liar and tyrant, and there's a song in which Elphaba begs Glinda to come with her into rebellion. This is cut 10.
Come with me. Think of what we could do together. Unlimited. Together we're unlimited. Together we'll be the greatest team there's ever been. Glinda dreams the way we planned them. If we work in tandem, there's no fight we cannot win. Just you and I defying gravity.
So you get this idea that this very feminine Glinda is somehow shallow and stupid and mean, but if she would just become a rebel, and we don't even really know, again, and as C.S. Lewis says, we don't really know what the rebellion is all about, what they're going to do that is good, except we know that the animals are sort of Jews, and we've got to save Jews because we remember that was bad when they killed them. But the idea is the rebellion. The idea is like she wants to take this feminine character and turn her into herself, who is the wicked witch, and she wants the good, but Glinda doesn't have the courage to go with her and stays behind. Now, we saw the same thing in the movie Frozen, that famous song from Frozen that all the little girls loved, Let It Go, which always kind of drives me crazy. This is cut 11.
Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now they know. Let it go, let it go. Can't hold it back anymore. Let it go, let it go. Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway.
So this is, the Ice Queen in this is actually an unfeeling, terrible person in the original story of the Snow Queen. And again, the rebellion is a good in and of itself. I don't care what anybody's going to say. I'm not going to be a good girl, which is to assume that the virtues of the society you're in are bad. So by being a good girl, you're really doing something wrong. You're being enslaved. And the question is always, are you being enslaved by a corrupt moral order created by people, or are you being enslaved by the moral order created by God, to which we're all indebted? All right. Now, I want to compare this to the actual Wizard of Oz. Great movie, one of the greatest of American films, 1939, when all the great films were made. And this is a story about becoming a woman. This is a story about the role of Dorothy to give the men around her courage, intelligence, and heart. She is going to help them, lead them to the great father figure, to give them the things that fathers give to their sons: courage, intelligence, and heart. And she does this by going before him, but he turns out to be a fraud. Now listen to this confrontation and hear the difference. This is from The Wizard of Oz, 1939, when they discover The Wizard of Oz. Cut 12.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
No, I'm afraid it's true. There's no other wizard except me. You humbug! Yes, it's exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
Now that is profundity in a little children's movie, 1939, The Wizard of Oz. He's a good man. He's a bad God. He doesn't take the place. In taking the place of God, he has erred. He has sinned in taking the place of God. But he is still, as a father, able to dispense the wisdom that the straw man and the tin man and the cowardly lion need to go on with their lives in an uncertain world where there's nothing magical that's going to give them the things they want. They're going to have to find them, and he gives them the signs that the world gives. So the standards of the world, he gives the straw man a diploma. He gives the tin man a ticking heart. He gives them things that the world rewards to show you that you have these things and encourage you in having these things. And to Dorothy, what is she? He give her. He takes her home, because there is no place like home. And that is ultimately her goal. That is what home gives you. That is what mothers give you. They give you the ability to get from the father the wisdom he needs. It's only when the father oversteps and becomes a god that he errs, because he's a good man, just a bad wizard. And this is a different story. This is a story that is about courage. It is about feminine courage and male courage. It is about defeating evil. It's about all these things, but it's not about just rebellion against all the values. And what Wicked does, and again, this is not attacking any of the people who made the film. I don't care about them. And I'm not even saying it's not attacking people who enjoyed the film. I could see why you might enjoy it. I thought the songs were catchy, as I say, and the singing was very good in part. It's not about any of that. It's about the idea that it embodies. This idea that rebellion in and of itself is a good thing, instead of making that division that Paradise Lost makes between rebelling against things that are created by men and are somehow restrictive, and things that keep you within the boundaries of the moral order. I actually, let me just play you a thing that MRC called the worst clip of the year. This is cut 13.
I've talked with a lot of experts on this, and I've seen it myself with my reporting, Michael, which is that the base of the Republican Party has shifted, right? Remember when Trump ran in 2016, a lot of the mainline evangelicals wanted nothing to do with the divorced, real estate mogul who had cheated on his wife and with a star and all of that, right? So what happened was he was surrounded by this more extremist element. You're going to hear words like Christian nationalism, like the New Apostolic Reformation. These are groups that you should get very schooled on, because they have a lot of power in Trump's circle. And the one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalist is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
So that offended her, and she said this quote was taken out of context. So she goes on to say she doesn't mind this so much as long as they're defending equal rights. But when they start attacking abortion and gay marriage, then they've gone out of the way. And of course, many people believe it's exactly the opposite. When the restrictions being put on you are restrictions that keep you from killing babies, or that elevate the male-female relationship and the family that comes out of that, that is a restriction that keeps you within the moral order. Everything in our culture is preaching to you to rebel against that moral order. And it's being pumped in by very talented people telling very good stories with very pretty songs that get very catchy. And I think we have to start doing likewise. January is the Sanctity of Life Month, a good time to honor the over 66 million babies whose lives have been tragically ended through abortion since Roe v. Wade. Sadly, since Roe was overturned, babies' lives are at an even greater risk. The abortion pill accounts for over 60% of all abortions, making this tragedy available 24/7. But in the midst of this darkness, there is a light that shines. Preborn. They've rescued over 300,000 babies from abortion, and every day, on average, they rescue 200 plus babies. When a woman considering abortion hears her baby's heartbeat and sees her precious baby on ultrasound, her baby's chance at life is doubled. Preborn shares free heartbeats and God's love for mother and child, and they need our help. For just $28, the cost of a dinner, you can sponsor an ultrasound to introduce a mother to her baby for the first time. 100% of your donation will go towards saving babies. Just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby, or donate securely at preborn.com/Klavan. That's preborn.com/KLAVAN. Final chapter, the conservative mission. So obviously we have won against the worst of their culture, but we have to build a culture. We have to build a culture, and we have to build a culture in a new world, not going back to the 50s. We don't want to go back to the 50s. We want to live in the new world. We want to live in with the blessings of new technology and new medicine and all this stuff. We don't have to tell stories about Jesus. We can. That's lovely. Some stories about Jesus are great, but a lot of them are really bad. But you can see that Wicked and Frozen, they don't have to tell stories about Jesus, about hating God. They just have to sort of break the rules and tell you that breaking the rules is inherently good in itself. And so we have to tell stories that actually elevate our traditions, that elevate our religions and the ideas that come out of those religions. We shouldn't be afraid of thinking about Judeo-Christian culture. It is a culture. It is a real thing. It's a comprehensible idea that has come down to us. You don't have to have it. We don't have to have a debate between Protestant theology and Catholic theology in every movie at all. We don't have to do anything. We only have to tell stories about life that are real and replace no values or misplaced values with good values. I've talked a lot about the movie V for Vendetta, in which it's a very entertaining kind of thriller, dystopian thriller. But if you watch it carefully, they've replaced real values with false values. They've put Muslims as the persecuted people instead of the Christians. They've made the Christians the persecutors. They've made Parliament the symbol of oppression, and terrorism the symbol of freedom. And so in order to tell the story that is a good story, they've simply replaced real values with false ones. We have to replace false values with real ones. And the three things really to look out when people win, it's like a rock band that has a hit song. They either go on to be creative and build on that hit song, or they break up. They're a one-hit wonder, right? Because when you have success, everybody gets guilty. Everybody gets kind of envious. Everybody feels like I contributed to that success more than you did. It's me who's the real voice of the. No, we have to work together, but we have to watch out for those three faces of the devil: anti-Semitism, misogyny, and materialism. We have to believe and honor femininity. We have to honor the Jewish and Christian traditions that have formed us and made us what we are. And we just have to reject this idea that everything has to be explained in anatomical terms. Every human thing has to be explained in anatomical terms. You are not getting depressed. Vastly, most people are not depressed because there's a chemical imbalance. There are a few people who actually are stuck with that, but most people are not doing that. That's when the machine that receives our feelings is broken. Most people are depressed because sad things have happened, or sad things have happened in their lives and have scored them, or because they're trying too hard to control the world and the world won't be controlled. We have to tell stories about real people. And at some level, every story and every life is about the same thing. This is the central story of life. Is there a man manly enough to win the heart of a woman womanly enough so they can come together and start the world again? That is what the central story of the world is. When they talk about the hero's journey, that's what that's about. When they talk about the Cinderella story or the Snow White story, that's what that's about. We believe in a life that has meaning, an invisible world that gives it meaning. We don't believe in utopia. We know there are dragons. We know there's evil. What we want to see is how to become the knight and the princess who fights those evils and holds them off so that they can come together and start the world again, in movies and in novels and in all the places where we tell stories, but most importantly, where we tell the story of our lives, the way we live our lives, because life is a story with a meaning too. And if you write to me and say, oh, I'm struggling with, my answer to you is stop struggling, stop looking at. If you're writing to me and say, I can't find a guy, I'm a girl and I can't find a guy, figure it out. Find the guy. These are the things we have to do. Life is a story with a meaning too, because it has an author. The only way a story can have a meaning is if there's a mind behind it, because that's where meaning comes from. It comes from the mind, and our lives come from a mind of a creator, and they have a meaning too, and he has a purpose. And we're free to play out that purpose or to refuse to play out that purpose, right? We can do those things, but when you turn away from that purpose, like Macbeth in the play, you turn toward meaninglessness and ultimately toward death. That's what we've been doing these last 50 years. That's the argument. We've won. We've beaten that argument. But now we have to build a culture, take us toward meaning and toward life. The first days of 2025 have made one thing clear. The fight we started years ago is not over. The terror attack in New Orleans and the Cybertruck explosion outside Trump's hotel in Las Vegas have shaken the nation to its core. In moments like these, you deserve facts, not spin, clarity, not confusion. That's why the Daily Wire exists, to bring you the truth the mainstream media won't touch, delivered by the voices you trust. Live breaking news, uncensored daily shows, and investigative journalism that cuts to the heart of the story. Don't wait. Join the fight for truth today at dailywire.com/subscribe. Klavan clapbacks.
We're going to win so much. We're going to win economically. We're going to win with the economy.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
We are never, ever playing that again. All right, from Shannon. I love your show because it's not just everyday petty politics. You share a worldview, an eternal view that really helps calm my anxiety while still knowing what's going on politically. 2 Christmases ago, my husband gave me The Truth and Beauty, which challenged me, and I really enjoyed. This Christmas, he gave me When Christmas Comes. I'm a mother of 4, and usually I read books slowly, a few pages at a time, but not this book. I finished this in a day, and I loved it. Since 2020, I've wanted to message you about my brother who is in prison for life for his 4-month-old baby. I said, she's saying, in a YouTube video that if your child was in jail, would you go to visit them? But what if they had abused an infant to death and pled not guilty? Would you still go visit them? I would go visit them under one condition, that I might help them see themselves in the real light of God. And the only way to do that is to hear them, listen to them, accept them as they are, so that they can see themselves as they are and hopefully begin to repent and tell them what they are. There's a really good movie about this. It's made by leftists, which really drives me crazy, but it's called Dead Man Walking. And I guess it's against the death penalty in ways that I disagree with, but it's about a truly evil man facing a nun. It's based on a true story. The book is very good too, based on a true story. And the nun goes and visits this horrible, horrible killer in prison and treats him with love until finally he realizes what, to some degree, he is. And I think that would be worth doing, but you shouldn't do it if it's going to destroy your life, because your life is important because of your kids. And, it has nothing to do with going there and forgiving him for what he did or accepting what he did. It would have to do with shining the light of God on him so that he can see himself in that light. And I would really strongly suggest that you watch. It's a tough movie to watch, but it's worth watching. Dead Man Walking, about a nun. And that would be the only way, if I could supply what that nun supplies in Sister Helen Perjean, I think her name is. If I could supply what she supplies in that movie, I would go and visit. If not, I would stay home. Why cause more trouble? You don't owe him a visit. You don't owe him a visit, but you do owe God a visit if you will bring him into that. Malcolm from Queensland, Australia says, here's a quick one about girls. I've been friends with a girl for years. I met when she was dating a mate. She's since dated a bloke with whom I became friends through her, but she's single at the moment. She's clever, kind, gentle, good, and gorgeous, and I'm crazy about her. So do you believe that men can be friends with women? Is it ever okay to date a mate's ex? I don't believe so. Point of honor for both him and her, but I'm willing to be convinced otherwise. We don't live near one another anymore, so would I be setting myself up for failure if I make a move next time I visit her? I listened to every podcast. You've taught me much and helped my mom deal with some hardships, so God bless and stay alive. My answers are, do you believe that men can be friends with women? Well, obviously, it's possible, but you have fallen into the normal thing, which is that you start to have feelings for them, and then it's very hard to just remain friends, and you feel that being a friend is actually not a very good thing. So that's the typical thing that happens. Is it ever okay to date a mate's ex? Yes, absolutely. If you're sure it's over and you really have strong feelings for her, I see no reason why you shouldn't date the ex of a friend. I don't believe that all is fair in love and war, but certainly that is fair. If you guys find love together, your friend should be happy for you. And, that's just it's not your concern. It is not your concern. So what am I setting myself up for failure? You're always setting yourself up for failure when you make a move. You may lose a friendship. You don't know what's going to happen, but tough. That's the game. That is the game. Is there a man manly enough that he has the courage to find a woman womanly enough that they can come together and start the world again? Up to you. You're on. All right, become a member today because we are about to plunge you into the member block. And those of you who are left behind will be instead plunged into Klavanlessness. You just got through Klavanlessness this holiday season. You know what it's like. You do not want to go through that again. Many do not survive. Those who survive are scarred for life. So become a member. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. If you haven't done that before, do it now. If you have, come on over to Member Block.